Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. Today's topic is for those of you who are very intuitive and sensitive to energy. And I want to chat with you about why, when you're very intuitive and sensitive to energy, talking it out is often a total waste of time. There's two main reasons for that. Okay, the first reason is that if this has to do with some kind of thing that's happening between you and someone else, the other person probably does not realize or recognize or acknowledge what is happening or that anything is even happening. Okay, so most people are not on board with psychic, intuitive, energetic things, occurrences. They're just like, that's all ridiculous. It's all your imagination. It doesn't exist. So if you try to talk to them about it, you're going to come up against their ideas about how the world works, which does not include intuitive, energetic stuff, right? And so if you try to talk something out with someone and it really isn't about something they overtly said or did, but it's something subtle that's happening and like a weird energy, probably, most people are not going to be very open to thinking about that, talking about that. But that's okay. That's okay, because you don't actually need other people to understand it or get it or talk to you about it or like try and make it okay. What you need is to learn how this works, because if there's something weird going on the energy planes, there's always something that you can do on your end that's going to resolve it for you. Always. So that's the good news. Like, you don't have to talk it out. But also, often talking it out doesn't work. Now, there might be times when you thought something was kind of obvious and psychological, and then you talk to people about it and nobody recognized what you're saying. Could be this is not happening in such an obvious, overt way as you thought, and it's actually something more subtle, more energetic that most people are not aware of or not open to that might exist. Okay, so that's the first reason why talking about energy stuff, intuitive stuff, and trying to resolve it that way often doesn't work. It can even backfire, okay? People can kind of look at you like you're crazy, or just not be open to talking about you with other things, or like they may feel like you're blaming them, or they just might be really uncomfortable. A lot of people get freaked out by anything intuitive and psychic, and they just don't want to go there, and they're really worried that if you even bring it up, bad things might happen. There's a lot of superstition around anything that has to do with subtle energy. Okay, now the second reason why there's really very little point in talking it out is because what you think is happening, what your mind thinks is happening, what your mind can perceive and put together and kind of come up with as a possible solution or explanation of what this is probably wrong. And it's not because you're dumb, and it's not because you don't know enough. It's because the mind is really, really bad at understanding and putting together what is happening on the energy planes, because it's typically invisible, it's very subtle, and even if you're clairvoyant, you might see some things, but it's not the whole story. And it's just too complicated a thing for the mind to work out, and there are too many possibilities of what might be causing what and what might be doing what. I see a lot of people who have some intuitive, some energetic knowledge kind of really oversimplify things. They've, for example, heard of cutting cords, and they're like, oh, this must be a cord and I have to go cut it, and without actually knowing how to check if that is actually going on and if that is actually helpful or if that's actually the issue at all. So when I work with clients who are very sensitive and intuitive on, figuring this stuff out, we're not talking endlessly about like how smart we are and their philosophies about the world. I teach them ways to test and check what is actually happening. And most of the time, it's not what either of us actually thought it was. So your observations, your ideas, your assumptions are a starting point for deciding, hey, there's something weird going on, and this needs to be looked into, this needs to be resolved, it doesn't feel right. But what exactly it is a whole process to figure that out. It's not something that you're going to be able to just, see or know. And even more than that, the people out there who are like, yes, I know exactly what's going on the intuitive, energetic planes. Like, I know exactly what this is. Like, I can see this. And they have this whole, like, story ready, like, at just snap of a finger. They're like, yeah, I know what this is. Usually those people are projecting, right? They're just taking their own assumptions, and they're taking their own feelings, and they're taking their own experiences. And they are saying, oh, that is all going on outside there, because they're not owning what's happening with them. That's why they're so sure. That's why they're so upset if you challenge their ideas, because it's really just kind of a projection, meaning a projection of taking the stuff that they don't want to deal with inside of themselves and like imagining it's happening around them. It's other people doing it. That's what projection is. But projection tends to happen in ways that we don't realize. Like, we're not consciously doing it. We don't decide to do it. It's kind of a very subtle, underhand kind of process that happens. But, people who do this, very mind-based, also very ego-based. And the ego is very good at making up stories and saying, this is definitely the truth, because the ego wants to know and wants to like have the truth and wants to be right and wants other people to be wrong. And all of that gets in your way if you're truly intuitive and you're truly sensitive to energy, because much of that is just complete bullshit, and there's actually something else going on. And if you are sensitive to energy and you pick up on a lot of things, you always need to be open-minded to maybe it's not what you think it is. Maybe there's something else going on. I have learned so much since I started the Happy Sensitive, and since I started working with clients who are very intuitive, very sensitive to energy. There are so many phenomena out there that I didn't even know about when I started. I had no idea this was even possible. And I have learned over time, this can happen, that can happen, that can happen. There's so many weird possible interactions and interminglings and things that can happen on the energy planes that most people would just think, that sounds kind of crazy. I'm sure that's not true. But I've just seen and experienced and dealt with a lot. And I've had to just constantly be like open-minded and be like, maybe there's more to learn. Like, maybe there's just something else. And because I've developed tools to actually check in with my intuition, with the deepest part of my intuition that really knows stuff that my brain cannot directly access, I have come across plenty of situations where my intuition was telling me, this is a new thing for you. This is something you have not come across before consciously, and you're going to have to learn some new techniques, some new frameworks to be able to understand this and resolve this. Come across this multiple times. Now, if you are always trying to talk things out in your head and work things out in your head, you never get to those new discoveries, because you're always stuck going round and round in what you already know. And what we know, like as a society, about energy and intuition is just very, very limited, very dumbed down, and also very dramatic. There's all these like really scary shows about ghosts and things, and portrayed in a way that makes a lot of people freak out about it, unnecessarily so. And so there's a lot of fear around anything that has to do with energy, psychic stuff, the paranormal. I once had a client who said that her aunt, and this is a very, very common idea out there in the spiritual world, that her aunt said, once you open that door, you can no longer close it, like very like, oh. And this was a client who was already just like up to here in energy phenomena that she was dealing with, and she didn't know how to deal with them. Like, this was not a matter of opening or closing a door. Like, the door was already wide open, but in her mind, she had this idea that if she could just kind of avoid dealing with the topic, then it wouldn't like come to her. I was like, look, lady, you're already like in it, whether you like it or not. You have to learn what this is and how to deal. And you can't just pretend that if you just stay oblivious, it'll all go away. It doesn't go away. It's right here. It's happening. So there's these really strange ideas that if you just try not to like engage with anything that has to do with energy, then that'll just like stay away from your life. But we are all living in this energy soup where all kinds of weird things are happening. The only difference is some people are more porous in their system. They're more sensitive. They're more open to noticing and being affected by things. And other people are more like tanks. Like they can like drive through the energy soup and it just kind of bounces off And so they can be oblivious and it's fine and it doesn't really affect them. But over the years, I have spoken to many people, some of whom were not really very sensitive at all, but they had like one particular issue that definitely had to do with energy and that were definitely picking up on something that wasn't healthy for them, right? And so there are lots of exceptions where even people who are not usually sensitive to stuff can be affected by things because those things are real and they affect people, and they can find a way in, I guess. It's kind of a creepy way to say it, but it's kind of like if you're you're swimming in a pool of water and the water's purple and it'll stain your skin, but you're protected by this like big bodysuit, and so you can just swim in that stuff and you never turn purple in any way because the bodysuit protects you. But then you get this tiny leak, somewhere, and then you have this weird purple spot, and now suddenly you're dealing with a little bit of that energy that's going on in the big energy soup out there, and you have to learn, like, what do I do with this purple spot? And then, if you get the purple spot off, you get the little hole fixed, then you're fine. You can pretend it doesn't exist anymore. But this is how many people at some point in their lives have a little bit of an interaction with like the energy soup that is around us. Of course, the people I work with most are the ones who are dealing with this all the time, sometimes feel like they're crazy because they notice and see things that other people don't seem to notice and see, and they're like wondering like, oh, is there something wrong with me? Is this just my imagination? And sometimes it can be imagination, but very often it's not. And maybe this is because the people who are just making stuff up don't come to me. That could be, right? There might be millions out there, but they don't come and talk to me. The people who come to me tend to come to me and say like, I have these weird things that I'm picking up on, or I think I'm picking up on, or that are happening. I don't even know how to describe it well, and it kind of feels like this, and I don't know what it is, and maybe it happens here, maybe it happens there, I'm not even sure. So a kind of very vague story. But because I have ways to intuitively test what's going on, with myself, with other people, in kind of spaces, I can usually take that and be like, okay, let's just check some things. I have some ideas, I have some hypotheses. Now let's do the testing so we can see what is actually going on with you. Now, this is a difficult transition for some people to make. I would say for a lot of people to make, to accept that your mind has no clue and never really will, and that you have to learn other ways to figure out what is what. And you have to make that transition from a very masculine, rational, mind-based approach to everything to learning how to work with your body intuition, learning how to trust what your body intuition is telling you, learning how to discern and decipher, because not everything you're feeling is literally true, obviously. So how do you know whether that's your intuition or whether it's something else? How do you stay grounded in your body so that the feedback you get from your body is reliable? This is a very big one. This is a huge one, because if you're dissociated and flying around your body and you're not really wanting to be here, you're like, I don't want to get away, then you cannot make use of your body's intuition, because really what's your mind and your fears are taking over. And so then everything gets tainted by this fear and this kind of mind control element that's like, I want to know everything, and everything that I don't know, I'm just going to pretend it's not there. Like, the mind can be really insidious in this way. So once somebody gets out of their body a lot, gets dissociated, gets really ungrounded, that body feedback becomes unreliable, and also the tools I teach people for checking what is what also become unreliable. So, a big part of being a healthy, intuitive, sensitive person is you have to really know how to be in and stay in your body at all times, because that's your feedback. That's your safety. That's the information you get about the world around you. That's how to ultimately know what is what. Not up here, but by being connected with your body and learning how to decipher and understand and sort out things. And so there's a lot of kind of letting go in that process, because the mind has to give up control. The mind has to accept that it doesn't really know everything, and there's a lot of things it's just kind of clueless about. That is hard for the mind, and it's hard for our cultural conditioning, which says the best way to stay safe is just think everything through. And that's connected to the talking everything through, right? If you think everything through, you can talk it through, you can get all your ducks in a row, and then everything will be good. And when it comes to certain topics, that is just not how it works. And that'll just keep you going round and round and round and round, and even get you more confused and more dissociated, where you start to tell yourself things that would make life easier. Oh, maybe this is just my imagination. Maybe I'm just making this up. Maybe I'm not really feeling what I'm feeling, and then you start to create layers on top of layers of layers of fantasies because you're confused and worried that you don't know what's going on. And then the mind wants to know. And so the mind creates stories about what the mind imagines might be going on. And that's really the imagination. So interestingly enough, a lot of what we worry is just imagination. When we feel things from the body initially, when you're kind of new to this journey, you're just starting, when you feel things from your body that kind of come out of the blue, the initial fear will be, oh, this is just my imagination. Most often, it's not. This is something real your body's trying to tell you, and it might tell you in the form of a metaphor or an image that doesn't make sense at first, but it's about something real. Whereas the imagination we're not worried about is all the mental stories up here. There's a lot of imagining going up here. It's just like, oh, I'm scared about something. Oh, I'll just tell myself a story to make myself feel better. That's the really tricky imagination that'll get you in trouble, because it kind of disconnects you from that body sensation, that body feedback of what's happening in the here and now. So, a big part of the journey that my clients go through is learning how to actually understand and communicate with and discern, hey, what is my body trying to tell me that is actually real? It just doesn't make sense to the mind yet. And also the mind will never be the expert on this, so it's got to take a back seat. And that's hard because the ego is like, I want to be in the front seat, I want to be driving. And the ego has to be like, go in the back. So, but when you learn to make that transition, you start to experience how nice that is, because you don't have to figure everything out all the time. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be able to explain everything to people. You don't have to be able to talk things through. There are points where you can just say, all right, I've done some intuitive checking in with myself on this. I know this is the direction I need to take. It'll take years of my life to try to explain this to other people, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to go in that direction, and then you're good with that. Saves you a lot of time, right? As opposed to always wanting to explain things to people so they can agree with you, and then they can validate what you're experiencing, and then you can feel, comforted and secure that you are right because that person also sees it that way. There's a lot of things that other people are not going to see that way, and it's not important for them to see it. It's important for you to see it. You need to see it. You need to understand it. You need to work with it. All those other people, they don't need to deal with it. They might have these bodysuits and these tanks that they're using, and they don't have to deal with that energy soup. So it doesn't matter for them whether they believe in it or not. They'll be fine. But it matters for you, right? And so there's a part of this journey too where you have to learn to let go of that, like striving for validation and striving for explaining and striving for like verbal feedback from everyone else that yes, I get it, yes, I see it too, yes, I understand, and really learn to trust your body and learn to work with the intuition of your body so that you get feedback from you about your life that you need, and that is enough for making your decisions. I'm not saying you should never talk to anyone. I'm just saying there are things, especially on the intuitive energetic front, that are very weird to most people, and you have to learn how to discern that. This is why the clients that I work with, I teach them how to just do this discerning themselves. I teach them how to intuitively test these things themselves so that they can also confirm things for themselves. When I tell them something, and this has happened sometimes I had a client come back and they're like, I'm struggling with something, I don't know what it is. And I was like, okay, let me do some testing. Okay, it's this. And they were like, no, that can't be. That sounds very weird. And so then they would do their own testing and they'd come back to me and be like, yeah, I got the same answer. I guess you're right. So I teach methods where you can check for yourself what is going on. If you apply those methods correctly, then if we're both testing the same thing, we'll come to the same conclusions. Sometimes it might be that you see and discern one angle of the situation and I discern another angle, and they're both true, right? But they're different angles, they're different aspects. That can happen. But there are ways to get to the bottom of things. But you have to, you have to shift that mindset from, I have to know everything, I have to talk through everything, to, no, I need to learn about, what kind of energy phenomena are out there, what kind of energy phenomena I am aware of without realizing that that's what it is, but somehow I'm picking up on it, and how to deal with that and how to discern that on my own eventually, so that when you're in a situation and there's something weird going on, you can resolve it. You don't have to go to some healer or some psychic or some person and be like, what is this? That ultimately, of course, you have to go through a learning process. You have to get some guidance to learn this. But then once you know how, that you can actually do this on your own and ask questions of your own intuition and be like, what is this? What do I need to do here? What is important for me to know about this? In this whole process, the mind is part of it. The mind's on board. It's not about just chanting and just believing, The mind is on board as a critical tool to come up with ideas and hypotheses and double check things. But the mind does not have access to a lot of information directly. And the mind has to do a lot of accepting of okay, we went through a rigorous process to get this information from the body, so that means I have to accept it. Because I, the mind, do not have access to this information. I just don't know. It could be anything. I always say the mind is like Google. The mind is like Google. You put anything into Google, you'll get something. You put anything into your mind, you'll get something. And it can sound very convincing, but it could be an ad, it could be bullshit, it could be somebody's personal story, it could be all kinds of things. And so while we rely a lot on our critical thinking and our mind and our ideas, for some things that is great and that's fine, but if you're trying to figure out something that wasn't put into the mind as information in the first place, you're just going around and around with conventional concepts of what it might be, and you get stuck, right? So you get stuck in this little loop of censorship, really. These are the only things that are allowed to pop up in the Google results, so this is the only thing you're going to find. And you have a feeling that there's something else, but you can't find it. You keep putting in the same words, you can't find it. That's, that kind of restriction, we also have that in our own mind, where the mind's like, no, those things are not allowed. Those are things that are too crazy or weird. We don't know what to do with that. So you're not allowed to get that answer. And so the mind is very good at recycling things you already know, reordering things you already know, reminding you of things you've already done. Like, hey, we've been here before, then that happened, let's not do that again, or let's do that again. But the mind is not good at discovering new things because it just goes around in a little censored Google search world. And if you want to break out of that, you're like, I think I need to learn about some new stuff I just don't have the words for. This is where the body comes in. The body is not restricted in this way. But in order to really communicate with the body, you need that connection between the mind and the body, because the mind is your interpretation center, right? If you're just working with the body only, it becomes very instinctual and it becomes very difficult, because it just becomes vague and nebulous, and I just have a feeling, you become like an animal walking through the woods. I have a feeling that I need to go in that direction. And sometimes that works, sometimes that's enough, but a lot of situations you need more information, because you need to know, is there some weird energy exchange connection thing going on with somebody? If so, is there something I need to do about that on my end? Do I need to let go of something? What do I need to let go of? Is that my feeling? Is that their feeling? All this kind of stuff. And so that's where, the body comes in, your body intuition comes in, specific techniques for communicating with that body intuition and getting the information that you need, and then relaying that to the brain and saying, okay, brain, we know this is going on, so now you know that's, based on this, we need certain techniques that you have also consciously learned. And then the brain can be useful and be like, I know this one. I've got this one. You need this one, but it needs to be connected to the body for that to work. If it's just operating up here, it's impossible to start distinguishing between fantasy, illusions, and real things. Everything just becomes one big, story mess. Yeah. And if you talk a lot about what you think is going on to other people, they will add their stories to the mix. And then you have all these stories and it can become very complicated and you can get very invested in the story. This happens too, right? This is the danger of going around reading articles on your own for 10 years and kind of piecing it all together, you think, and then you've constructed this version of reality that you think this is what's going on with me. But you really don't know because it's all mind-based. You've all just collected stories that feel good on some level. You're like, yeah, that feels good. That makes sense, I think. So let's just add these in. And then you become invested as in like, this is me. This is my personality. This is who I really am. I'm a starseed or something like that. And that means these and these things. And then more stories get piled on top without ever checking what actually was the problem I was trying to solve. What is that problem really, and what are the tools I can use to resolve that problem? Instead, it becomes just more and more bigger stories. And I don't have that problem so much now, but there has been a phase where I really upset a lot of people because they would come to me and they were like, yep, I'm an empath. And be like, okay, well, tell me more about that. Give me some examples of things you've experienced that, kind of showed you that you were an empath. And then they just go, I just know. Right? That's the mind talking. And sometimes it gets disguised as clair-knowing, which is why clair-knowing is a bit of a problem. You can intuitively know stuff, but the problem is if you latch on to this concept of clair-knowing, the mind can really hitch a ride on that as well and just be like, oh, I know things because I'm claircognizant. This is just clair-knowing. I know these things intuitively. It's like it all gets mixed together. So it becomes very hard to then distinguish, is this just my mind talking or is this my intuition? So yeah, I've upset a lot of people because I asked them questions and I kind of wanted evidence from them and I wanted to double check some things with them and they were not open to that because now it had become their identity. They had gathered stories about empath suffering and the beauty of being an empath and how amazing empaths are. And empaths are like angels on earth. And it all got added onto their kind of mind and their ego understanding of themselves and the world and their problems. And here I was saying, well, maybe you're not an empath. Like, let's figure it out. And they were like, no. Caroline, I'm clearly spiritually superior to you because, no, you're very judgmental for asking these questions. Get this kind of stuff. And that's what happens. That's why it's so important to learn ways to, in your body with your intuition, check what is going on. Because if you give the mind free rein, if you give the mind too much time to just build stories and gather, seductive explanations that make you feel good, they might be true, but they might not apply to you at all, and you don't really know, and you just get further and further away from actually solving the problem, and you get more and more entrenched in this, constructing this identity. I self-identify as this wonderful purple rainbow being that is like angelic and trying to help everyone, and it's like more and more stuff gets added on, and if somebody were to challenge that, it becomes more and more painful. Wait, I am not a unicorn? Like, how dare you, Whereas if you just start from a place of like, okay, I'm noticing some weird things. I'm not sure what it is. Keeping an open mind, wanting to really understand what this truly is and wanting to find a solution. And maybe it's this, maybe it's that. That sounds interesting. I don't know. If you're willing to able to stay in this place of I don't know, you have a lot more chance of really resolving it, right? But once you start talking about it a lot with people, that kind of like, I don't know, doesn't really work. It's not a good story. It doesn't sound very good, right? So the more you talk about it with people, the more it's going to turn to some version of like, yeah, I think it's that makes sense. Yeah, ooh, I like that one. I'll take that one. I'll take that explanation. Like, give me five. Like, just yes, that feels really good. And instead of actually solving the problem, you just get busy adding on more fur coats. Ooh, I like this one. I like this one. And so you get further and further from actually dealing with what, you need to deal with. So yeah, for some things, talking about it is great, is helpful. You get understanding, get feedback. I'm definitely not suggesting people bottle stuff up, but some things are really, really good to talk about. I'm not saying you should bottle everything up. I'm just saying when it comes to subtle energy and psychic stuff, you can talk and talk and talk and talk and not get anywhere and just accumulate stories that sound more true the more often you say them, but they may not be true at all. And so it's really important to have ways to figure out what is what. If you've experienced things and you're like, I would like to know what is what or what this is, you're always welcome to set up a clarity call with me so we can talk and I can use my intuitive testing methods to help you figure out what is going on and what you can do about it. There's a link below for setting up a clarity call, and I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.